Every day he scavenged for food in trash bins, surviving on half-eaten hamburgers left behind by others. For a homeless man who could barely stay alive, it was incredible that he saved up a week's worth of spare change just to buy a set of handwritten English flashcards. When he finally reached the counter to pay, a little girl nearby frowned at him in disgust. Feeling self-conscious, Willy placed the money and the cards on the counter, hoping the girl's mother would help him pay, then quietly turned and walked out. The mother did pay for him and handed him the cards, but the reason he wanted them went back to the night he found a burned diary. That diary would change his life forever. Its owner was a little girl who had recorded her days after her mother's death. In its pages Willy saw loneliness, every line soaked in grief, and her solitary soul resonated deeply with his own. Two lonely hearts began to connect. But apart from the first page, the rest was written in a cursive script he couldn't read. He had tried asking other homeless men for help, only to be mocked and insulted. That night he couldn't sleep, not from the cold, but because something had finally given him a reason to care. The next morning, a missionary came by preaching that God helps all who need help. Willy asked him to read the diary, but the man refused, saying he had to go help others. To someone homeless, these useless scriptures meant less than a piece of bread. Now, with the flashcards, reading the rest of the diary became a little easier. What surprised him was discovering the girl was afraid of thunder, just like he was. As if on cue, thunder rumbled overhead, and he curled up in his cardboard shelter, trembling in fear. Hugging the diary tightly, Willy knew it was more than just a book. It was like an old friend willing to open its heart to him. The next day, with the weather clear, Willy carried the diary up to the rooftop to bask in the sun. Under the warm light, he stroked the diary again and again as though caressing a dear old friend. That day he found a pencil and sharpened it against the wall, then began writing on the diary's blank pages, trying to talk to the girl as if she were there. As a homeless man, he was unbearably lonely, and he instinctively longed to be her pen pal. He wrote down his name, his daily life, and the struggles he faced while begging for food. He confessed how he loved to stand alone on rooftops, gazing quietly over the city, often imagining himself as a bird flying away. He usually slept during the day, because at night there were always sudden attacks where people robbed the already miserable. Not long ago he had lost his sleeping bag this way, turning him into a night owl. The nights were calm but painfully lonely, with no one willing to talk to him, so he poured all his thoughts into the diary instead. One day, he folded what he wrote into a paper airplane and gently tossed it into the air, imagining it might somehow reach the girl. The girl, like Willy, longed for a friend, but in her diary she wrote that she felt invisible, unnoticed by other children. When her mother was alive, she used to comfort her, saying that whenever she felt alone, an angel would come to embrace her. Yet no angel ever came. Willy's life seemed destined to continue unchanged, until one night a luxury car suddenly appeared. Two young men inside wanted to see two homeless people fight, promising $50 to the winner. Willy only came closer to watch, but a large man shoved him from behind, and just like that, a brutal duel began. Caught completely off guard, Willy was beaten down at first, the two of them trading punches and kicks on the freezing street. But in the end, Willy's fists proved stronger, and he pinned the man to the ground until he could no longer move. That was how he claimed the $50. One of the young men raised Willy's arm high, announcing to everyone present that he was the champion. In that boastful yet triumphant voice, Willy for the first time felt a powerful sense of recognition. What he didn't know was that the young men never truly saw him as anything, they had only chosen a beggar like him as a way to pass the time. Instead of using the $50 for a decent meal, Willy went to a hotel and rented a good room. He washed away the dirt covering his body, then lay quietly on the bed, savoring the softness of the mattress, eating snacks under the dim light while watching television. Perhaps afraid of becoming too attached to such comfort, he ultimately chose to sleep on the cold floor that night. The next morning he stepped out of the hotel and returned to wandering the streets. There he noticed a homeless man in a wheelchair. He remembered seeing him across the street a few nights ago, struggling to move forward under the burning sun. Out of kindness, Willy wanted to help push him, but the man coldly refused. Seeing his attitude, Willy tried another approach. "If you read this diary for me, I'll push you wherever you want to go." This time the man agreed. Through small talk, Willy learned that his name was Pinky, a retired soldier who once had his photo taken with the president, and now he was on his way to a pawn shop to trade in the medals he had earned with his legs. He had assumed the medal would fetch a good price, but the pawn shop owner offered no more than $15, a remark that wounded Pinky's pride so deeply that he grew furious and ultimately refused to part with it. That night, fortune smiled on them when they dug up 2 large leftover chicken legs from a trash bin. Though crawling with ants, they were enough to keep hunger at bay until sleep came. With Pinky's presence, Willy, who had long been used to solitude, slowly grew accustomed to the noise and chaos of the streets and began learning how to blend in. When asked what his dream was, he calmly replied that he just didn't want to die alone. Years of drifting had made him withdrawn, and the rootless life stripped him of any sense of security. Instinctively, he sought even the smallest source of comfort for his spirit, whether it was a diary salvaged from a garbage heap or a stray dog abandoned by its owner. He gave them all the warmth he could. When he begged with a stray dog in his arms, people usually gave him more money, but instead of using it to fill his own stomach, Willy bought canned meat for the dog. Sitting beside it, he continued reading the girl's diary. She had written that some people only appear briefly in your life, and when they leave, they are truly gone, leaving you alone again. She wrote of how she longed, every moment, for the angel her mother had promised would come to embrace her. Those words struck Willy deeply, for once again he had been left on his own, and he knew all too well the bitter taste of loneliness. Sometimes he would ride the bus just to be among strangers. He didn't care about the strange looks people gave him, because what he truly wanted was to be seen, to feel that small but vital sense of existence. In his heart, Willy quietly encouraged the girl, telling her she would definitely find friends. One day at the library he saw a copy of The Little Match Girl, and her story reminded him so much of the girl from the diary that he pasted its cover onto the diary and told her, "I know you're real." He kept folding his letters into paper airplanes, perhaps imagining thunder might come again that night, but in his heart he promised he would always be there with the girl, because friends are meant to stay by each other's side. When the new year arrived, people gathered joyfully on the streets, greeting one another with cheer, but Willy stayed away from the noise and went to the rooftop alone. Placing the diary beside him, he imagined the girl sitting there too, watching the brilliant fireworks light up the sky. For others it was a celebration of new memories, but for Willy it was a genuine outpouring of his emotions and a bond that kept him going. Yet by the next morning, the streets had returned to their usual quiet, as if nothing had changed. Willy and Pinky went to the garbage heap to search for scraps, but Pinky's eyes were fixed only on cigarette butts. He confessed that back in the war he had feared lung cancer and never smoked, yet now he was left with ruined lungs, wishing he had just died from cancer outright. To comfort him, Willy picked up a piece of cardboard from the trash and wrote, "War Hero," on it, which quickly drew the attention of passers-by. Within half a day, they had gathered a generous sum. With their earnings they went to a hotel hoping to rent a twin room, but the clerk, unwilling to let them stay, deliberately doubled the price so that one bed cost as much as an entire room. Kind-hearted as always, Willy gave the rare chance to Pinky, while he himself returned to the streets, exposed once again to the cold night air. By chance, Willy wandered into a brothel in the slums. Having never been with a woman before, he was nervous, but just as things were about to begin, he stopped her. Curious, she asked what he really wanted, and Willy replied that he longed for love, the kind of love that could warm the heart and make someone fall in love with the world again. Her eyes welled with tears, and she pulled him tightly into her arms. Realizing true love could never be found there, Willy returned to the streets and once again joined the underground homeless boxing matches. Each time he fought, he pummeled fellow drifters, while the young men filmed the scenes to draw in wealthy gamblers. This time Willy earned even more money, and one of the men praised his performance, even calling him a friend. Though Willy's face remained expressionless, inside he was stirred, unaware that he was simply being used. With money, he could now afford decent hotels, yet sleep often eluded him. He no longer had to worry about food, but somehow he felt lonelier than ever. Soon the coldest part of winter arrived, and Pinky shivered uncontrollably. Willy led him to a fire to warm up, and in gratitude, Pinky continued reading the diary. The girl's life was filled with suffocating sadness. After her mother's death, she was taken in by her uncle, a drunkard who despised her. Sometimes she wished she could join her mother in heaven so they could be happy together again. Pinky stopped reading, saying the story was too painful. Confused, Willy went to his side, but Pinky confessed something darker. He didn't want Willy to like him anymore because, during the war, he had killed an innocent girl. His captain had forced him to shoot when the enemy used her as a human shield, and though he obeyed, the memory haunted him ever since. He believed he was not a good man. Willy felt sorrow for the girl but still accepted Pinky as his friend. Unable to forgive himself, Pinky walked away into the night, and from that moment, they never saw each other again. Willy never heard any news of him thereafter. That night the young man returned once again, and Willy picked an opponent eager to earn money. This time the young man brought an even larger crowd. Willy unleashed a frenzy of punches on his fellow drifter, driven by nothing more than the fear of disappointing the one he thought was his friend. The young man cheered wildly for him, thrilled at the spectacle. But suddenly, the very first man Willy had once beaten appeared from behind and ambushed him, demanding the $50 from before. Seeing his friend being threatened, Willy rushed over, grabbed a frying pan, and struck the man dead. The moment blood was spilled, panic erupted. Everyone scattered in terror. Even the so-called friend he had fought so hard to impress vanished without a trace, leaving Willy alone, frozen in shock. He crawled back into his cardboard shelter, clutching the diary tightly, yet still felt unsafe, so he hurried up the stairs to hide. Sure enough, police arrived soon after, but instead of chasing him, they quickly lost interest. After all, no one cared about the death of a homeless man. Still, the guilt gnawed at Willy, keeping him restless. Carrying the girl's diary, he went to the cemetery. His father, like the girl's mother, was in heaven watching over them, and even if they could not see each other, that thought gave him a sliver of comfort. Throughout his life, Willy had witnessed countless deaths and knew his own would come sooner or later, but he longed for someone to remember him. In a park, he found a dead pigeon lying on the ground. He wrapped it in newspaper and placed it in a tree, believing simply that pigeons belonged in the sky, even in death. He knew the girl was a good person, and through her, he had become a better man. Though he possessed nothing, if the girl could somehow receive his letters, he would give everything he had to help her. That night, as Willy passed by a pawn shop, he was shocked to see Pinky's medal inside. Without hesitation, he spent $50 to redeem it, knowing it represented Pinky's honor and dignity. He planned to surprise his friend the next time they met. The night was bitterly cold, and as soon as Willy returned to the block, he hurried into his cardboard shelter, only to see Pinky across the street, curled up in his wheelchair, shivering in the freezing wind. Seeing this, Willy immediately took out the blanket he had long been saving, intending to give it to his friend. But when he reached him, he realized that Pinky had already passed away. Willy froze in shock, and an overwhelming wave of grief surged through him. Though the streets were icy and desolate, nothing could stop the hot tears streaming down his face. He took care of Pinky's body and left the medal forever at the spot where his friend had fallen. That same night, the block's guardian appeared, kicking over Willy's cardboard box and questioning him about why he had been fighting and hurting his fellow homeless. The blanket Willy had cherished had been given to him by this man, who quietly watched over the block and did his best to help its people, refusing to let them harm one another. Willy insisted that the young man he had been fighting for was his friend, but the guardian asked, "Do they sleep beside you in these boxes?" The question left Willy speechless. Listening to the man's anger and disapproval, Willy suddenly realized the truth. He had merely been used for entertainment, and he had foolishly harmed his neighbors again and again for money. Overcome with self-reproach, he pounded on a trash can to vent his emotions, feeling utterly foolish. All he had ever wanted was a true friend, only to discover that he had been taken advantage of instead. On the rooftop, Willy decided to cut all contact with the little girl. He no longer saw himself as a good person, but as someone who had betrayed friends for money. He faced the reality of the paper airplanes that never reached her. He no longer desired the endless hamburgers. What he yearned for was a love that could never be hurt. Realizing that no one would ever love him again and that he had lost the right to love others, Willy sank into deep despair. He went to the military, hoping to enlist so he could die with purpose, but was rejected for being too old. He begged them to use him as a human shield, even offering to be discarded at will. Though his resolve impressed them, nothing changed. At that moment, he felt like a rat scurrying through filthy corners, merely surviving. It was then that the young man returned, driving in with more wealthy thrill-seekers. He labeled the beggars as dueling slaves, while the rich participants became Roman nobles. But this time Willy hid, and no one else was willing to fight. The guests were ready to place heavy bets, and if no one competed, the night's business would be ruined. The young man raised the prize to $100, prompting the weakest elder in the block to step forward. Driven by hunger, he could not allow himself to starve. Yet no matter what the young man said, the others remained indifferent. Just as the elder despaired, he noticed Willy silently hiding in a corner, but having already seen through everything, Willy refused to participate. The young man kept urging Willy, "Look at that frail old man. Do you want to watch others fight, or will you do it yourself?" To prevent anyone from harming the elder, Willy reluctantly agreed to the young man's demand. But when the match officially began, he stood completely still, letting the old man's weak, feeble punches land on him. To make it easier for the elder to strike, he even knelt on the ground. His action seemed like an act of repentance for his past deeds, a plea for forgiveness from these homeless men for his previous wrongs. Seeing Willy respond this way, the young man finally dropped his mask of hypocrisy. He pulled out the little girl's diary as leverage, threatening to throw it into the fire if Willy did not act. Looking at the frail elder and then at his most treasured diary, Willy, unwilling to betray anyone, still did nothing. Enraged, the young man hurled the diary into the flames. Willy rushed forward, toppling the metal barrel and desperately trying to save the diary. Even as the fire repeatedly burned his hands, he fought to retrieve it from the blaze. After a fierce struggle, the diary was ultimately consumed by fire, and Willy's hands were severely burned. Lying on the hospital bed with a blank expression, he was overwhelmed by loneliness and despair. Although he had lost the diary, its contents were already etched in his memory. He unconsciously began reciting its words, expressing his longing for his mother just as the girl had. He wanted to tell her about the wrongs he had done and the idle hours he had wasted. Willy's heartfelt words, transmitted through the open call button, reached the hospital corridor. Soon, a burned girl emerged from another room, quietly standing outside his ward. Listening to the familiar words, for a fleeting moment, she seemed to see the angel her mother had once told her about. During the time Willy was hospitalized, the street guardians suddenly intercepted the young man's car, pulling out a weapon and forcing them out. At first, the young man assumed it was a robbery, but the guardian had no interest in their money or car. Instead, he demanded that the young man and his friends fight, declaring that the winner could drive home while the loser would stay behind to endure the consequences. After giving these instructions, the guardian began a countdown, intending to repay them in kind. The young man's companions rushed at him, and an intense duel ensued. Watching the fight unfold, the guardian could only laugh at the spectacle. A few days later, Willy's injuries gradually healed, and the medical staff returned him to the streets. Ever since the little girl's diary had been burned, he had completely lost hope in life, sitting on the street like a walking corpse. Seeing this, the guardian quietly gave him another blanket before leaving without a word. That day, Willy stood on the street as usual, begging silently. He no longer proclaimed anything or asked for anything, simply watching the constant flow of traffic pass by. A devout believer stopped before him and explained a way to be guaranteed a place in heaven, but Willy replied, "I don't want heaven, I only want hell." The believer was left speechless and was eventually called away by companions. Just as Willy's life seemed entirely engulfed in despair, a little girl passing by noticed him. She slowly crossed the street and approached him. Her burned face and pure eyes met his, and in that instant, the two lonely souls connected. Without a word, Willy knew she was the true owner of the diary. At that moment, Willy became an angel, embracing the girl. When two wandering souls collide, even the silent wind seems to applaud. Cardboard Boxer is a 2016 American drama that explores the loneliness and pain of three marginalized souls: Willy, a homeless man, a little girl, and a disabled veteran. Through a diary, the director bridges their isolated worlds across time and space. Willy learning to write, sending paper airplanes he can't deliver, and the girl being moved by his recitations in the hospital. These moments become the film's most poignant highlights. The bleak streets, cold boxing matches, and the burning diary reveal the harshness of life at society's margins, while Willy feeding stray dogs, redeeming the veteran's medal, and protecting the diary act as small lights in the darkness, reflecting human purity and resilience. This is not a story of despair, but a journey of awakening, allowing viewers to confront their own unheard loneliness through tears.